Maitreya Sangama Kadavasaha Samvada Etad Varnayana Prabhu Raja Uvacha Kutra Shatur Bhagavata Maitreya Sangama Kadavasaha Samvada Etad Varnayana Prabhu Raja Uvacha Kutra Satur Bhagavata Maitreyanesha Sangama Kadavasaha Sambhada Etad Varnayana Prabhu
Rajavacha Kutra Chatur Bhagavata Maitreya Sangamaha Avasaha Sambhara Etad Varnayana Prabhu
Rajavacha Kutra Chatur Bhagavata Mitrayana Sangamaha Kadavasaha Sangvada Etad Varnayana Prabhu
Rajovacha Kutra Kshatur Bhagavata Maitreya Sangamaha Kadavasaha Sambhara Etad Varnayana Prabhu
Rajovacha Kutra Kshatur Bhagavata Maitreyena Sasangamaha Kadavasaha Sangvada Etad Varnayana Prabhu Rajovacha Kutrakshatur Bhagavata Maitreya Sangamaha Kadavasaha Sambhara Etad Varnayana Prabhu
Rajovacha Kutrakshatur Bhagavata Maitreya Sangamaha Kadavasa Sangvada Etad Varnayana Prabhu
Rajovacha Kucha Shatur Bhagavata Maitre Nasa Sangmaha Kadavasaha Samvada Etad Varnayana Prabhu
Raja Uvacha. The king said, Kutra, wherein? Shatuhu, with Vidura, Bhagavata, and with his grace, Maitreyena, with Maitreya, Asha, there was, Sangamaha, meeting. Kada, when. Va, also. Saha, with. Samvadaha, discussion. Etat, this. Varnaya, describe. Naha, unto me. Babo, O my Lord. Translation and purport given by His Divine Grace, Swami A. Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. The king asks Sukadev Goswami, where and when did the meeting and discussion take place between Saint Vidura and His Grace Maitreya Muni? Kindly oblige, my Lord, and describe this to us. Purport: exactly as Shaunaka Rishi inquired of Suta Goswami, and Suta Goswami replied, so Srila Sukadev Goswami replied to King Parikshit's inquiries. The king was very anxious to understand the meaningful discussion that took place between the two great souls. Dhanavir Maharaj, we would really like to hear your thoughts on Srimad Bhagavatam.
In the Bhagavad Gita, Sanjay makes a conclusion. Wherever there is the discussion by the two great souls, Lord Krishna and Arjuna, then it's very auspicious. Someone can find that verse, 18th chapter. So, when two great souls get together, Saint Vidura and Maitreya, then something wonderful will take place. Same thing, because they'll be discussing the Lord. All their discussions will be based around the Lord. They won't be talking about other things. It's to be understood, when persons of high caliber get together, they speak about Krishna. Yeah?
So this one, wherever there is Krishna, the master of all mystics, and wherever there is Arjuna, the supreme archer, there will also certainly be opulence, victory, extraordinary power, and morality. That is my opinion.
That's one. But the other one was about the samvada. The discussion. So talks about Krishna are as good as Krishna's presence. When one speaks about Krishna, he is authorized then, or asks questions about Krishna, then that discussion is as good as Krishna himself. Krishna is not different than his name, his fame, pastimes, his form, his entourage. Everything to do with Krishna is Krishna, absolute. And so one can become, as we were discussing lately, one can become a pure devotee, transcendental to the three modes of material nature, regardless of his birth or his background. Or anything else. Even if he's born as stated in Bhagavatam, Kirata Hunanda Pulinda Pulkusha Abhir Shamba Yavana Kasalaya Yenyej Papat Pashasha Shujanti Tasmai Pravishvenva. By the power of the Lord, even those who are born in families or dynasties of persons who are engaged in low activities, low in regards with goodness, passion, ignorance, means they're engaged in materialistic things like this. And, yeah.
Shami cha muhur muhu. O King, as I repeatedly recall this wondrous and holy dialogue between Krishna and Arjuna, I take pleasure being thrilled at every moment.
Yeah. And this word samvada is used, meaning the discussion. So we were saying that no matter what one's past is, or one's birth, if they engage in devotional service, Mami Partavya Bhashitya, Ebishu Papayonayaha, Sriyo Vaishastata Shudras, Tepi Janti Paramgatim. They can attain supreme destination, doesn't matter the birth. That's the power of devotional service. That's why it's for everyone. It's not that only if one is born into a certain family can he reach perfection. Even if he's born in a family of dog eaters, that doesn't matter. Of course, he cannot continue with that. He'll give up bad habits. If one becomes a devotee of Krishna, then he automatically acquires all the good qualities. Because Krishna has all good qualities. And if one associates with Krishna, he develops all those good qualities. Just as if an iron rod is put into a fire, it attains the qualities of the fire and becomes red hot like the fire. Similarly, one becomes as pure as Krishna. That's the idea. If one is always thinking of Krishna, always working for Krishna, then he's become a red hot iron. He's become fire. And someone says, he's not fire, he's an iron rod. No, touch it, it'll burn. Burn just like the fire. So everyone has the opportunity. No one's barred. There's no restrictions. Krishna consciousness can be delivered to everyone. However, one has to know how to deliver it so that one doesn't commit offenses in one of the offenses of the chanting of the holy name is to instruct the faithless persons about the glories of the holy name or about Krishna. One has to be careful so that the person doesn't, if he's faithless and offensive, then he should not be given such presentation. He won't be able to accept it. But then there's other things you can do. You can hear kirtan, or you can take prasadam, things that don't require as much piety. Even an impious person will be happy to take prasadam if he's hungry. So under conditions. And hearing about Krishna is as good as being with Krishna. The hearing about Krishna's pastimes is the same as Krishna's pastimes going on. We may not appreciate that in our present state, but it's true. Just like an expert dramatist, he takes a particular story and he presents it in such a dramatic way, colorful way, that the audience appreciates the presentation more than just if someone narrated a story when it's acted out. That's all there on the absolute platform. There's no difference. So one can enter into the pastimes of the Lord by performing devotional service. He enters into the path. He can be with the Lord all the time, where the Lord is. He's not restricted. He carries the Lord with him, pure devotee. A saint like Vidura, he carries the Lord. It doesn't matter whether Saint Vidura was speaking or Maitreya, because they're both pure devotees. Therefore, they're both qualified to deliver the. That's the ideal thing.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. The pure devotee who's carrying the Lord with him all the time, he's heard sufficiently, so he has access to those pastimes to carry with him. We may not have heard sufficiently, but we're very fortunate in this day and age. We have a nice facility to hear all the time. Or in previous ages, like the setting of the Srimad Bhagavatam, there had to be many sages assembled. You had to encounter a very rare soul who knew Krishna and could talk about Krishna. And this is the setting that the Bhagavatam takes place in. We have access to this the most special information. We have access to Krishna just at the tips of our fingers all the time. You know, someone remembers one word in a Bhagavad Gita verse and we can pull it up on Veda base at the tip of our fingers. This is very fortunate, you know. Diving into the Lord's pastimes through devotional service can become possible with these amenities that we are given and with the service that so many different Vaishnavas have done in this International Society for Krishna Consciousness. They've recorded so many talks about Krishna, you know, that are non-different than Krishna. And if we can just go on hearing them and performing devotional service, he'll make himself perceivable to the sincere follower. He'll make himself available. It's very special. So here in the Srimad Bhagavatam, that's the setting that we're on. There's all of these sages, and they're assembled in the forest of Naimisharanya. And here this canto is beginning with questions from Vidura to Maitreya Rishi. And in fact, the entire Bhagavatam is in the form of perfect questions and perfect answers. The whole Bhagavatam is being spoken between different sages, and they're asking each other questions about transcendental subject matters. And these different questions that they're asking each other, they're not necessarily in chronological order, but they all are about the supreme subject matter in life. And in the opening of the Bhagavatam, there were 6 principal questions that were asked in this holy place of Naimisharanya amongst the sages. And the sages are sitting here, and there's this great personality who's on an elevated seat, Sutta Goswami, and he's answering these different questions that the sages are presenting to him. And one after another, he's noticing that all of the questions that these great souls are presenting are all about Krishna and are all about the supreme goal of life. So he could understand immediately after answering these 6 questions that were presented to him that, let me tell these people who are anxious to hear about Krishna. Let me speak about the different conversations I've heard about Krishna. Let me tell what I've heard. So like that, he goes on, and he's ready to further answer questions by these sages. So this is very important because everyone in the material world, they have some experience of satisfaction to some degree. They're getting some satisfaction because this body, it needs some kind of maintaining. We're so busy all the time with this bodily maintenance, and with the maintenance of our body, we are thinking that we're getting some satisfaction through that, isn't it? Through maintaining our body to get strength, we're thinking we're getting satisfaction through giving it nice palatable things, giving the tongue nice palatable things, or we have a need to procreate. The human species needs to go on, so we think we're getting some kind of satisfaction through the sex desire and propagating or making children. So each of these bodily maintenance activities, the living entity is always going to be entitled to. No matter what, he is entitled to maintain his body. It's something that he has to do since we have this vehicle. Shri Shri Gaur Nitai Ki Jai. So, but this is not exclusive for our species of life. There's 8,400,000 species of life, in fact, and 4,000 or 400,000 of those happen to be this human species. So it's very, very rare, that we're in this body, and all these other different species of life, they also are concerned with these 4 things: this eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, the maintenance of this body. Where the humans, they can also spend their life being concerned with what the animals are, concerned with. They have that right to choose to do that. But that will just condition them to be just like the animals, and they'll perhaps get a birth as an animal, or just stay, in a very low consciousness, low style of life, and just waste their very rare opportunity. Or we can choose to utilize it for the only thing that the animals cannot do. They can do these four things, but they cannot inquire about the absolute truth of life. And they cannot learn about God. They cannot experience God knowingly. Maybe in very rare cases they may, but the human beings, they have a science that is given, that is spoken by the person who created them, of how to realize that they're part and parcel of Him, and their constitutional position is to render service with love, with affection towards the person who's created them. In our position, if we don't give service to the person who's provided everything for us, it would be awfully selfish, wouldn't it? If we were just constantly engaged in taking more and more and more and more without expecting to give anything in return. Have you ever had a successful relationship in your life where these were the dynamics of the relationship, where you just kept taking and taking and taking and taking and taking, and just ignoring that the person was doing all these things for you? No, that's not how successful relationships operate. So if we're interested in developing a successful relationship with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then we will take up this devotional service, and we will be very grateful for it. We will do it not out of duty or out of being told, but we will do it out of love, out of thanks, out of gratitude, out of hope that maybe you will provide some mercy for me, this very lowly fallen soul. Maybe you will provide some mercy so I can get to know you, so I can too help the whole world get to know you. There's a question that's asked sometimes: if God is so great, why does He put suffering in the world? And I've heard it explained like this: He was missing us so much. He just he wants to be with us. Krishna, He wants to be with us. He wants us to come back to Him. And if we weren't suffering here in this material world, what impetus would there be to start trying to know Him very personally? There would be a lot less impetus for the fallen jiva souls if they were just enjoying all the time. Because then the only one of the four ways that somebody would come to Him, it would only be out of wanting to know Him, because they have knowledge if they're not suffering, they have wealth if they're not suffering, and they have, they're not suffering. So these are some things, they come to know Krishna. Does everyone follow? They come to know Krishna through those four different ways, and three of which entail suffering that is on the living entity, some level of it. So if we had no suffering, there would only be the impetus to get to know Krishna, but so little people would know Krishna if there was no suffering, that so little people would turn towards him. Because, somebody who is truly in a hopeless condition, somebody who actually has that mood internally, um, can rely on God a lot more than somebody who thinks I can do it, or that I do have hope independently. There is no hope independently. The only hope is that we go on serving, and he gives us his mercy. That's it. Otherwise, we're just relying on the material energy to bring us up and take us down and take us for a ride around town. We don't want that. We've already realized that. So everyone is busy trying to satisfy these different bodily demands, every living entity. But these things, these processes of maintaining these vehicles, it doesn't bring the occupant of the vehicle satisfaction at all. Who is occupying the vehicle? The soul. And to maintain the body, and it doesn't actually nourish that soul. Whereas devotional service and the Srimad Bhagavatam and topics of Krishna nourish the soul. So we have to first understand that we're not the body. And when we factually understand that we're not the body, things in relation to the body are not going to concern us so much, beyond just the bare minimum maintenance quota that we have. A nice way to see, kind of where someone is at is how concerned are they with these bodies, you know. It's a very kind of easy way to tell, like, how Krishna conscious someone is. Someone could be, in a kirtan for a couple hours, and somebody could be thinking, wow, he's very Krishna conscious, but the second the kirtan stops, he's reminding everyone on, how cold his body is, or how he's so hungry, or how he's so tired. It's like, the medicine is to forget this, the medicine is to chant the mantra and not think about these things, but we're so conditioned, like we're addicted to this body and the things that go on with maintaining it so much. We have more of an interest in just going into ignorance for many, many hours every day than to hear things that nourish the soul and satisfy us spiritually, give us such satisfaction that indeed our teachers are telling us that it makes you forget about doing these things that we're thinking are so satisfying. But we're so addicted to the instant gratification that, we would just rather stay in ignorance. So this is a very important subject matter, because these sages are talking about things that are not in relation to their bodily maintenance. They're not behaving on the platform of animals, and Sutta Goswami can see this, that they're actually serious about trying to hear transcendental subject matter, because their souls too are left unnourished. And they've too experienced that, okay, just trying to do these things to maintain my body, it's not leaving me with satisfaction. So therefore there has to be something that will satisfy me. And Sutta Goswami can see that they're in they're in the ripe condition to hear. This very rare position. You know. So similarly, we can think of ourselves similar to those sages at Naimisharanya. Seated before, the great acharyas, Srila Prabhupada, Dhanavir Maharaj, all of our sampradaya here that we have at RVC present with us. We can just prostrate ourselves at their feet and beg them for their mercy and try to just hear as attentively as we can and try to apply this perfection of life in the most practical way in our life without changing it, And then once we have sufficiently situated ourselves in this platform of Krishna consciousness where we're no longer being tossed around by these modes of material nature, then we can help someone else. But if you're being just tossed around by the modes of material nature and you go to try to help someone else, you don't know how obvious and how perceptive it is, maybe, how easy it is for somebody to actually perceive when somebody's out of the modes of material nature and when somebody is in it. It's actually a very easy thing to see if you're trying to present this philosophy to someone and you're in total passion or total ignorance. Like, it's very easy to see for anyone. They may not be able to defy why it's not so attractive what you're saying, but because you're in the modes of material nature, what you're presenting to this person, it may not seem so attractive. Whereas somebody who is beyond these modes of material nature, they know if you present it correctly, it's a delicate way to present the philosophy. And if you present it correctly to the right person who has the proper adhikar, he's going to take it. But we want to get this net of motive goodness developed, so we have something to fall back on, because it's difficult in the material world to stay above the material modes of nature all the time, totally fixed in meditation on Krishna. So it's said that when we're not in that, if we're conditioned, for the mode of goodness, then it's much easier to bounce back into transcendental consciousness, because you're much more organized, you have knowledge, so it's very much easier to bounce back into, thinking about Krishna. Whereas if somebody is, conditioned for the mode of ignorance or the mode of passion, it can be a pretty slippery slope if he forgets about Krishna. So sometimes I find this kind of funny. Sometimes I don't quite hear like what people are saying if we're out preaching, or even if people are speaking in the temple. I might not exactly hear what they're saying, but just by how they're saying it, I can tell like where they're coming from a lot of the time. A lot of the time there's a whole subtle way to how people are presenting this philosophy. They could be presenting Krishna consciousness philosophy fine, but internally they're completely frustrated, they're completely anxious. And it shows so much just in the presentation, even if they're speaking about Krishna. So Maharaj is talking about the value of hearing and understanding that in any condition, if we're hearing about Krishna, that is non-different than Krishna. But I know if we're trying to present this to the mass public, I know if I can very easily perceive like things like this, then the mass public definitely will. And if you're not, like, you can just catch their eye by if you're in the mode of goodness, because who are they meeting with that is in the mode of goodness? Everyone is just in passion and ignorance. So it's like, if you're just in passion and ignorance, there's not going to be anything that really stops them and catches their eye and says, okay, here's somebody that I think I'm meeting that knows a thing or two, you know, without being properly situated in goodness or the transcendental position, then they're just going to perceive you like just another Joe Schmo, Joe Schmo on the street. You know, this guy, he doesn't know what he's talking about. You know, so I don't know. These have just been some things I've been noticing in myself over the years and trying to work on. You know, presenting it to this highest philosophy to the public. It has a lot to do with, you know, your internal. It's just a reflection. It's Krishna's arranging all of these situations for his devotees to try to come to him more, you know, and when he does give us some intelligence on how maybe we can improve in our services, it's really important that we discuss that amongst each other, because that's one of the loving exchanges, is to reveal your mind amongst devotees. And, you know, some devotees living in a devotional community, someone could have realizations that other devotees couldn't have for 30 or 40 years. You know, so you would be doing a great disservice if you don't actually share your realizations with the devotees when the time comes to share it. You know, like, we don't want to hoard anything away just for ourselves, because it's a team effort to try to go back to Krishna. Because we know that really pleases Krishna when the fallen jivas can get back to him. You know, so what's more pleasing to Krishna than to bring others back and share too some knowledge that you've learned through devotional service. You know. So do any of the saintly people have questions that are left unanswered here? Okay, Jai. You guys have understood Krishna. Haribo. Srimad Bhagavatam ki Jai.